Hi, it's Debra Danielsen. Welcome to the Rebel podcast this week. I am really excited about this podcast. Why? For the very first time, in the name of setting the record straight, we are going to go behind the scenes on 16 and Pregnant. The very first 16 and Pregnant that started the whole MTV franchise for Teen Mom. And as, I guess, the keeper of records here, I brought on a special guest who I'm going to introduce now. And this is Tyler Cooksey. And you saw Tyler in this episode as one of Farrah's best friends, member of the cheer squad, and the person that stood behind her and was there alongside of the whole ordeal. So welcome, Tyler.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So what I wanted to do now that you and I have had a decade, a little over a decade. Actually, it'll be 14 years next week that Sophia was born. So now that we have the benefit of a 14-year gap here, we've seen and heard so many things. And we know that a lot of those things that we've seen and heard have been misinformation, or I guess like they say it today, fake news. And one of the things I wanted to do was get the narrative straight, because I feel like there were a lot of pictures painted that didn't really tell you the story. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, going around in the background that we were not allowed to talk about because there was a possible felony conviction on the line for my ex-husband, Michael Abraham, for pulling out a knife on Derek Underwood and threatening him. And also Derek had been killed in a car accident. So there were things like that going on in the background that legally we could not talk about. And now is the time, I think, let's get the record straight about child abuse, sexual molestation, bullying at the TJ High School cheer squad, and all kinds of other things that have been going around that are absolutely not true. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's kind of like a Pandora's box has been opened all over again. Kind of like kind of think back in the archives and remember what we lived. What an adventure. What an adventure that was to have our whole senior year captured on national TV. We definitely didn't have any idea that it would become what it is now. That's for sure. Right. But I mean, it really did. We really pioneered the beginning of that franchise into what it is now, and it's been really great to kind of see the other girls come on and things like that. Yeah, it's what a whirlwind. I'm super glad to be here.
We never ever thought, sitting here in Council Bluffs, Iowa, we never ever thought that this show would go viral, would go in over 150 countries, and would still be on Paramount Plus today. That's saying a lot. And I don't know about you, but personally, I have had highs, I've had lows, I've had moments to be very grateful, and I felt like doing the show was a blessing overall. but there were also some very, very difficult moments. I
Mhm.
want to go to one of those first very difficult moments. And it's when you're watching 16 and Pregnant and they show you and Farrah, and you're at the high school and you're doing cheer practice. And then, Farrah tells Sabrina that she's pregnant. And as you know, things started unraveling at that point. Can you tell us a little bit about the bullying that went on?
Yeah, so full transparency, and then something that a lot of people don't know, Sabrina in real life really was the only one that knew at that time. When they opened after we left the pizza place in 16 and Pregnant, and Farrah was like, and Tyler, where she's talking to me and she tells me she's pregnant. That was the moment that I found out from her mouth.
I didn't even know
That was really how it happened. And Sabrina gaslit a situation that really didn't need to happen. I think not only did she start a fire with the announcement of somebody else's pregnancy, she spoke for Farrah, but she also told Farrah's story with a really like odd narrative. Does that make sense? Or where she kind of like, she said it in a negative way that just brought like Sophia coming into this world was a blessing, right? But the way that Sabrina spread that message to other people was it really in a negative connotation, in my opinion. So I just remember finding out that I remember hearing rumblings of it, but I didn't really ask Farrah about it behind scenes because we were so close that like it didn't matter to me if she was pregnant or not. I knew that she would tell me when it was right for her, and I just wasn't going to press the issue. It just wasn't really important. I knew I was going to support her no matter what.
And see, I love that. And I just want to say, I really appreciate that. One of the main reasons that we sit down as a family and we made a decision to do 16 and Pregnant, to even share our story, was because when I went to high school at Thomas Jefferson, the same high school that you went, Farrah went, etc., I will remember this for the rest of my life. Two people who were my friends and are just two beautiful women. One was not a cheerleader, one was a cheerleader, but the result came out the same. Both of these women became pregnant. And listen, you don't become pregnant all by yourself, right? So that's the first problem, is that they only punished and bullied, badmouthed, and talked poorly about these girls. Oh, you're so cheap. Oh, you're so, you can't be trusted. And oh God, what are you? You can't control yourself. It was horrifying for me to see this. And both of those girls had a very, very hard time getting through high school. And they always felt less than. They felt like they were not enough. And then they were just like pushed down into almost the dirt. And one of the guys that got the cheerleader pregnant was actually the quarterback for the football team. And he went off scot-free, doing great. And I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is so much like what I saw my friends go through. And I'm not going to stand here and let my daughter go through the same thing that I watched these girls go through, because it was not fair. So in all honesty, before I started this podcast, I reached out to the Council Bluffs School District. I reached out to the principal of TJ and the superintendent of schools, asking if they would like to share, since the airing of Teen Mom, 16 and Pregnant, reality TV stuff, right? Showing real life experiences. How has that affected their administration of young women who come in who are faced with unplanned pregnancy? I didn't get a response from either one.
Yeah, I think a pretty big takeaway from that, Deborah, is like, you lived that in your generation, right? And it was jarring when you were faced back to the school again with your daughter, right? And you just see that the tides hadn't changed. And this just goes to show that we have a lot more work to do in this sector, for our young adults, for our kids that ending up pregnant. And unfortunately, here we are 14 years later, and again, the tides haven't changed. So I think what it does is it really sheds some light on some areas that the school needs to work better on, as far as accommodating, supporting, and making sure that we're not ostracizing somebody who's already probably not feeling the best about their situation. Everybody knows you have sex, and that's how you get pregnant, right? And
it takes more than one human
so
being.
are we only ostracizing the ones that have done something that have gotten pregnant?
Yeah.
Right.
That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
So now the other thing that was going on behind the scenes, which was not talked about, is that you were the only male on the cheer squad.
Mm-hmm.
But there was some undertow going on that was not appropriate in that sense. And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was the first male cheerleader ever to cheer at TJ. And that was like the second year that we had like really talked about me doing it before. And my mom had kind of gotten some backlash from the athletic director at the time, who basically told my mom that it was like an image thing. She didn't know how that would appear to other people. And she didn't necessarily come out and say she didn't want a guy on the cheer team, or that it had to do with any other external things, but I think it became very evident that the school had a lot of prejudices to work through, that they hadn't worked on yet.
Remind us what year this is that this happened.
2009.
2009. And I would say to all of our listeners, it never crossed any of our minds here that you didn't belong on the cheer team, because by 2009, there were male cheerleaders in every kind of orifice I can think of in the United States on these cheer teams and on professional cheer teams.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I'm super grateful in my situation for sure. The year that I was finally able to try out, there was a lot of logistics that went into that. There wasn't a lot of like co-ed sports, right? That wasn't like a topic that we broached like we have now, right? Like, and vice versa, whatever that, I won't even get into that. But I'm super grateful we had two very strong women take over the cheer coach or the cheer team our senior year, and really advocated for us. And even when the Farrah thing came down and came to fruition with the pregnancy, the coaches really did their best to their ability to accommodate. That's a difficult sport to do so. But to mitigate the gossip mill that was coming from the girls on the team became next to impossible. And I'm pretty sure the final straw, if I remember right, I think it came down to like Farrah and Sabrina fighting about something, and Farrah's like, I'm done. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going. Because I just got my friends back. I'm leaving too,
I think they briefly touched on that in the episode when you were all at Godfather's Pizza, and then they were just like, oh, here she comes. Let's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and Farrah told Sabrina, you should not tell anybody else. And she looked like she had just seen a ghost because she knew that she'd been telling the whole school.
Yeah, that sucks. So I guess the next topic I want to hit behind the scenes while this part was going on, I had been working as an executive for a major corporation for Alcatel-Lucent. And so I traveled all the time, as you know, and so I was in and out of town. And while I was out of town, my parents watched my children, and then I called every night and I spoke to my children. On this one particular day, Farrah was at home, and she was supposedly upstairs in her room sleeping, and Michael heard noises. So Michael's story is that he got up. Now, bear in mind, that's on the 3rd floor of our house. Our room is on the 1st floor. And in between is a whole lot of space, right? With dining room, living room, all of this kind of thing, kitchen. So Michael goes upstairs, gets a butcher knife, and is roaming about the house. I'm in Atlanta. And I guess what comes down next is I get a phone call from Farah telling me Michael is in jail. And Michael's asking me to bail him out. Come to find out, Derek Underwood, this is the 2nd time this has happened now. And when the cop came to the house and asked Michael, he had heard Michael had a weapon. Michael denied having a butcher knife. So when the police officer was walking on the rug, he felt something under the rug and pulled the knife out. Yeah. I mean, so there you go. Caught in the act, right? Off to jail. And now I'm so upset and so embarrassed and so humiliated that I said to Michael, no, you're just going to sit there because I cannot put up with all these lies. So did you know about any of that? Did Farah share that?
I did know about that, and I knew that he slid the knife under the rug. I think it was a bit. I mean, I understand that we couldn't talk about it
Yeah.
at the time, obviously, because it was an open, like it was in litigation, like it was an open case.
Right.
However, I do feel that like had that have been vocalized from the beginning, I think that the narrative of Mr. Abraham probably would have looked a little different.
Yeah, and what people don't realize, they saw him a little bit in 16 and Pregnant when Michael was driving Farah in the car. They had a little brief shot of Michael and Farah arguing. And what most people don't realize is Michael just was incessantly arguing with all of us constantly. And only when the camera came on did he seem to go down to a meek, mild narrative, like he is a likable guy. And in the back side of this thing, we were starting the initial process of getting a divorce because he had multiple affairs. And at this point, while he was still living here and Farah was about to give birth at this point, he had a love interest up in Des Moines, Iowa, which is 2 hours away. So in 16 and Pregnant, we're in the hospital and Farah's about to give birth, and I'm crying because I'm calling him on the phone, and he was obviously asleep and didn't look at his messages. And he was asleep with this person. Okay. Nobody realized that Michael was actually off with some other woman, and it took him a day and a half to get to the hospital to see Sophia, and it was only a 2-hour drive.
Yeah, I remember that. And also I should note that going back to the screaming match in the back of that red BMW, I was very much in the back seat. That was going. Michael was my ride to cheer back. So I'm like, oh my God. No, we were going to like an out of our district game, and we were going to homecoming. It was the same night, and I was like,
exactly.
Michael, like we have to just get there alive.
Yeah, and it was scary because he gets to going and yelling and using his hands, and who knows if he's even paying attention.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing is too, like, is he can be very argumentative and just very he's discreetly argumentative, like
yes,
like backhandedly, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
But also like he is just absolute gasoline on whatever fire has going on with Farah. He absolutely cannot control her and has no way, because she's not easy to get along with in a lot of ways. And I think that's a fair thing to say, right? And there is a certain way that you have to maneuver with her.
Yeah.
to keep the conversation going and to keep her from going left, and he just drives her right into the ditch every single time. I'm just really just kind of like gaslighting her anger, and that's where a lot of like that anger stuff comes from.
And I think in a lot of ways he does it purposefully, both to her, to me, to anybody, because it's his way of getting you out of his space so he doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't want to have to take you somewhere. He doesn't want to have to take out the trash. So let's create a big argument, right?
Yeah.
And so every week when I would come home, I would fly home, on a Friday night usually, or sometime Friday morning. Now it's the weekend, so Michael would create this big blowout argument and take off so that he wouldn't have to be with or around the family for the whole weekend. It was just horrible.
Yeah.
So moving on from there, we often hear Farrah talk about how she was sexually molested. She had a really rough childhood, and oh my God, I don't even know what all she's been saying, but I want to go on the record to say Farrah comes from a very privileged background. And I was always taking her and my other child and Michael, when I could get a hold of him, to church. That was a big part of our life. And we read the Bible and we studied the Bible. And I believe that. And there is no way in this world, because I had been taking Michael to several PhDs to get him, mental health. No way in this world that the girls were ever left alone with him, ever. And just to be very clear, my dad never molested anybody. My husband, my ex-husband, Michael, was a known situation. We kept him arm's length away from everything because that's what the doctors told us to do. And you see a little bit of this with Dr. Ish on Family Boot Camp on WeTV, where Michael is called out for even lying. He thought he was the smartest guy in the room constantly. And he even lied on the lie detector and walks in the room confidently, smugly smiling, sits down next to me, and Dr. Ish nailed him and called him out. So Dr. Ish is my superhero. It was at that moment I felt like I had finally gotten out of the gaslighting prison that I was in.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know what? And honestly, I stopped filming after season 1. You know what I mean? And I've always been kind of like a behind the scenes type of friend. And we've done some YouTube stuff together before, but for the most part, I try to stay out of like the light as much as I can. But I think anybody with a half of a brain cell could put together a pattern here, right? When does Farrah talk about trauma? When does she talk about these horrible things that happen to her? When she's losing her spotlight, right? So this is a soundbite that you get a decimal of to remain relevant, but there's no context, there's no proof, there's nothing. It's just a little soundbite that you can drop, and then your mind can wonder, and then the rumor mill starts, and then people start selling things to the tabloids, and then it reignites things. So it's really a sick process. But like I said, anybody with any amount of critical thinking skills would understand that there's a very certain time that she does it, and it's almost like a holiday. It's like a season when it happens.
It's like when she needs a boost or something, or wants to drive empathy, or she needs like people to care about her. She wants to drive sympathy, I think. She'll come up with some far-flung, fantastic thing. And, that's not it. And I don't condone that. I've never been about that. The other thing that she has accused me of time and time again, that in 16 and Pregnant, they also have covered this 2 or 3 different ways during that first 16 and Pregnant episode, is she came to me and said to me, Mom, Derek is a terrible person. He's going out with all these other girls. He's doing drive-offs at gas stations. I go, what's that? I didn't even know. And she goes, well, Mom, that's where you go and you fill up your gas tank and then you put the thing back and then you just drive off and you don't pay for it. I'm like, oh my God. And
that tells you how long ago that was, that you would be able to.
I know. And then she was telling me that he was taking drugs and she was saying that he would go into stores and he would steal. And then she told me that he was fighting with his mom constantly at home and that was a horrible relationship with Stormy. So, for her narrative to come out, oh, Mom, it's your fault. You hated him. You're glad he's dead. And I could not even breathe when she started saying that because, first of all, life is precious. And I stopped her from going down and getting an abortion because I knew that living in her was a human being with a soul, right?
Yeah.
And Sophia is like one of the most beautiful, important people I've ever met in my whole life. And I love her. She's my mini me all over the place. And it just breaks my heart that I can't talk to her or can't see her because of Farrah's, attitude situation.
Mental health stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really kind of eye-opening to see the narrative play out on TV, and then like you can't deny it to me. I actually lived it, and I was friends with both of them externally before the show. Right. Even when they were broke up, I still remained neutral and was friends with both of them, right? And the story that you were being told, there was some validity in some of it, right? Some of those stories that she told you, she was doing, right? So of course, naturally as a mom, you're like, I don't want my kid around this. She's making a good decision for herself. I'm going to support her, right? But what happens is she is venting to you in a sense, right? And then you're like, no, I'm going to help you set this boundary, but then she doesn't want to.
Yeah, exactly.
And like when she was like, my mom said that, well, I'm glad he's dead. Like, again, anybody with critical thinking skills, nobody would actually say that.
I never said that. I would never.
Nobody. Even if my worst enemy died, I'd be like, oh my God, they're like, what about their family?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, nobody is that malicious. I'm sure there are some people that are like that. Maybe even on this show. I don't think it's either one of us though. But I think that those people do exist, but they're going to be very far and few between.
As a matter of fact, shortly before all of this happened, Derek came over one night and Derek and I went outside in the garden and we had a talk. And I shared with him that I was heartbroken that he couldn't understand the fact that this was a big deal for us. Mm-hmm. And it's a life changer when you have an unplanned pregnancy and you're not married and you don't know that you even want to be with that person the rest of your life, right? Mm-hmm. And so I explained to him what I would like to see happen. And he talked back to me and we had a very good conversation. Mm-hmm. And we had an agreement on what we were going to do, like what was the next steps, right? We had all of that worked out. So about 2 or 3 days after that, Farrah came back to me and said, well, Mom, Derek said that you will just get over it. I said, get over what? She said, oh, you're going to get over all this drama and pain. It'll be fine. I'm like, no, it's not fine. This, this is involving an innocent human being here that hasn't even come out yet. And we don't know what you guys are even going to decide to do with your lives, right?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I think it's also important to remember, like, the story that you got of Derek from Farrah, right? But I wonder what that story looked like, the story that Farrah gave to Derek of you.
I know. I have no idea. And that's such a good point. because I had nothing, I had no animosity. I had no thought about Derek. I didn't even know Derek existed. I found his wallet outside our house on the sidewalk, on the public sidewalk, and I tried to do the Good Samaritan deal, right? I found a TJ ID in there, so it was the middle of the day. I called the TJ. They go, well, we got to call his parents. I said, okay, great, whatever. The wallet's here at my house. I found it by my mailbox, so just tell him to come pick it up. Well, I get this really bizarre off the wall phone call from Stormy accusing me of somehow going after her son. I'm like, what are you talking about? I've been out of town. I come home, I find some stranger's wallet on the ground. It's got money in it. It's got all these ID cards. I'm just trying to give back the driver's license, the ID cards, the money, all of this stuff. I thought it was important. Well, I'll come and get it. She never ever showed up. So Farrah goes, I mean, this like went on for 4 or 5 days. So I just brought the wallet in the house. I put it on the kitchen cabinet, and Farrah goes, I'll just give it to him. It's somebody I know. That's how I found out he existed. I didn't even know before that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
think there was a lot of like a blunder in the situation that just made stuff a lot worse. And it adds up that something Farrah's involved with made a mess. Shocker, right? But I think that had you guys have been able to communicate back and forth without somebody like painting a terrible narrative of him and a terrible narrative of you, I think you guys would have found a lot more common ground. Like I said, he was my friend too.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, he was my friend too, and I remember he would go to my mom's house and play Guitar Hero with her when because he would get out earlier because he was a year older than us and we were juniors. And he would go hang out with my mom, wait for us to get home, and like he was cool in a lot of ways, but nobody's perfect, right? And I'm not here to speak on any flaws that he had, and we miss him dearly, but
right.
It's a really tragic situation that all of this ended up like this, and I think that a lot of it has to do with Farrah's manipulation tactics, and I think that we've seen that year over year on that show of how things play out, right? Nobody is consistently a victim of bad people that often. I'm not buying it.
And even if you were always the victim, you've got to sit and look at yourself and say, well, if I'm always the victim, what am I doing wrong? How can I take responsibility? And how can I be a victor and not a victim?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's a healthy mental attitude. And at some point, every one of us in life grow up in a moment and say, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore because that's obviously not working out, right? I'm going to change and I'm going to do this now. And I think, I did that about when I was 18, and I was just hoping that maybe that would happen already, but it still is in progress, I think. So
I think her situation's a little bit different because the chaos and stuff that she ensues, she's been exploited, she's capitalized on, she makes too much money being a mess, right? If you fix those things, right, she loses a lot of her storyline.
Right. And here's the sad part. If she would have pulled it together, she could have been super, super commercially, I guess, profitable in her career, right?
Yes.
Versus going and doing stuff that's backdoor and pornography. That's not the way we roll. I don't go for that. That to me is not good. It's an abomination. And I believe that when you have somebody and you are in a relationship, that's precious, and that you keep that as I don't know, it's like a really special thing that you keep and hold tightly. It's not something that you just, let's go profit some money off of this and let's just, get wild and crazy and do bad stuff. I just think that that's not good.
I think a lot of the issues that come to her, whether she believes that she creates them, whether she believes they are brought to her, is the inability to see people for a soul.
Right.
She views people as objects. And you know, we were friends for a lot of years. I mean, if you watch the show, you'll see I was not one of the people that were talking bad about her. I had her back all the way up until the end, and then randomly, I don't know why, something just stopped. We stopped being friends. And it's like I never even existed, right? And I think that somebody of her caliber definitely has no, you know, has no overabundance of people who have had her back. She doesn't seem to entertain that, and I'm 30. I'm going to be 32 years old here. I don't have time to chase people around who don't want to be in my life. And honestly, I don't have bandwidth for the drama that would come of having her as a friend. I'm good.
And then I just want to tell you thank you, because you have done a lot of things to be very supportive of not only Farrah, but our whole family. And I value our friendship, so I really appreciate that. I guess one of the hardest moments too was the slap heard around the world, as Dr. Drew puts it. And I just had reached a moment. It just seemed like when the cameras came on, Farrah's idiosyncrasies got worse. She started recognizing that she was getting a reward in a narcissistic way for that behavior, which caused it to go out of control. So I just don't feel any parent needs to be told all of those horrible things, screamed at, cussed at, lied to, your life threatened. And believe me, I've been through all of that. I have had my life threatened, and I was thrown in jail when somebody threatened me and beat me up and pulled my hair out, right? And then there was a lie around all of that. It's just like, I don't need that mess in my life. I value people who are honest, hardworking, and people who want to be with me, and people who want to be happy, right? So maybe you could do one other thing here. I put out little videos where I'm trying to be lighthearted, because we've had a tough go around here with COVID, being isolated, self-isolating, all this crap, right? So when I go out in my garden and I do a funny little thing, it seems like people think I go around in character all the time, and I'm just mindlessly doing this, and this is how I live. What would you tell them?
That it's literally, I mean, you watch 22, 25, 30-year-olds dancing. Do you think that that's what they do like all day long? Like that's just a 10-second clip of a moment. That's just like a funny moment. I can't tell you how many serious talks you and I have had just sitting out in your garden, it's never been in character. I don't understand it. I see the comments on there a lot, and it's like, but it really is it's just to be funny. It's just to be funny. It is not your responsibility to be serious 24/7. It is not your responsibility for you to be anything that other people want you to be. And I think that's how we get along. I don't care if you want to dress up like an octopus and walk around like that for the rest of your life. I'm gonna be there. I don't really care. You know what I mean? It's not that deep to me. So it really is just a character, and it's just a snippet of a 24-hour day. 10 seconds of that.
Exactly. And it's like any of these comedians, when they get up and they're on stage for an hour and a half, and they're entertaining you, when they get off the stage, they're their own person. They're not walking around in character, walking into the grocery store, Walgreens, Sam's Club, whatever, belting out one-liners, right? They're just a regular human being trying to function. Yeah. Well, thank you for all of that. I really appreciate it. Now, looking on 16 and Pregnant, is there anything else in that episode that really stands out in your mind that you want to call out and get straight?
I'm trying to think, there was a lot. It was my whole it was my whole senior year. I don't know, I think that they could have done a better job of, you know, they wanted to talk about the negative things with Farrah. They didn't want to talk about our relationship, like that we kept being friends.
Yeah.
Even when they stopped, I was her only friend that came to the hospital. Like it was all of that. I wish it would have emphasized a little bit more on like maybe why we stopped being friends. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people assume that everybody that was in her life then have done her wrong. That's not the case.
No. Actually, very few people have really done Farrah wrong.
Mhm.
It's really more of how she doesn't accept people or actions, or is very unskilled at conflict resolution, right?
Yes.
And I think what's really important, if you really love or care about another person, you want to figure out how to resolve a disagreement, or why don't you see something the same way? And it's okay to agree to disagree. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, fine. But why make it to a thermonuclear threat level where we have to have a meltdown? We don't need that.
Mm-mm.
And I just really feel badly that she can't cut herself a break and get some slack, because it's harmful to her mental and physical well-being to have those things going on. So anyway, thank you for being a friend, and thank you for taking time out of your life to get the record straight. And I look forward to whatever else comes up that we need to talk about. I look forward to you being on the show again.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Bye-bye.
I hope you have a great evening. Take care now.
You too.
Thanks.